The morning sun cast long shadows across the desert floor when Jake Harrison first saw the smoke rising from the Apache settlement. His weathered hands gripped the reins tighter as his horse, Thunder, shifted nervously beneath him. Jake had been tracking cattle rustlers for 3 days, but the thick black smoke told him something far worse had happened in the valley below. At 28, Jake had earned a reputation as one of the most skilled trackers in Arizona territory. His sun-darkened skin and steady blue eyes spoke of years spent under the harsh desert sun. Unlike many cowboys of his time, Jake had always believed that Apache people deserved the same respect as anyone else. This belief had earned him enemies among his own kind, but Jake never backed down from what he thought was right. As Thunder picked his way down the rocky slope, the smell of burning wood and worse things reached Jake's nose. His stomach turned when he saw what remained of the small Apache camp. Wagons lay overturned and burning. Personal belongings scattered everywhere like fallen leaves after a storm. The silence felt heavy and wrong. Jake dismounted and walked carefully through the destruction. His boots crunched on broken pottery and torn clothing. Near what had been the largest tent, he found tracks in the dust. Boot prints, not moccasin prints. White men had done this, not other tribes. Jake's jaw tightened with anger as he counted at least 12 different sets of tracks. A soft whimper stopped him cold. Jake turned slowly, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. The sound came again, weak and frightened. Following the noise, he moved toward a pile of collapsed tent poles and buffalo hides. Underneath, he found her. The Apache girl couldn't have been more than 16 years old. Her long black hair was matted with blood, and her traditional dress was torn and dirty. She clutched a small leather pouch against her chest with both hands. When she saw Jake, her dark eyes filled with terror, and she tried to crawl backward despite her obvious injuries. "Easy there," Jake said softly, crouching down and holding his hands where she could see them. "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl spoke rapid Apache, her voice shaking with fear and pain. Jake didn't understand the words, but he recognized the tone. She was begging, probably for her life. It made his heart ache to think of what she had already endured. Jake slowly removed his hat and set it on the ground. Then he pulled his bandana from around his neck and held it up. "Water," he said, pointing to his canteen. "Medicine." He touched his shirt pocket where he kept a small bottle of whiskey for cleaning wounds. The girl watched him with the wariness of a trapped animal. Jake moved with deliberate slowness, every gesture designed to show he meant no harm. He had learned some basic Apache words from friendly traders over the years, and he tried to remember them now. Jake, he said, pointing to himself and using the Apache word for I am. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. The girl's eyes widened slightly. She touched her own chest and whispered, "Ayana." Jake nodded respectfully. "Ayana." He repeated her name carefully, wanting to get it right. The sound seemed to calm her a little. Over the next hour, Jake worked to gain Ayana's trust. He moved slowly, keeping his distance while he assessed her injuries. She had a deep cut on her forehead and what looked like a badly twisted ankle. Her ribs might be bruised or broken, judging by how carefully she breathed. Jake noticed that Ayana never let go of the small leather pouch. When he pointed to it with a questioning look, she shook her head firmly and held it closer. Jake understood. Some things were too precious to share, especially with a stranger. As the sun climbed higher, Jake realized they couldn't stay in the destroyed camp. Whoever had done this might come back, and Ayana needed proper medical attention. But first, he had to convince her to trust him enough to leave with him. "Ayana," Jake said gently. He pointed to the burning remains around them, then shook his head. "Bad men come back." He made a gesture like men on horseback returning. Fear flashed across her face again. She understood the danger, even if she didn't understand all his words. Jake stood slowly and walked to Thunder, who had been grazing nearby. He patted the horse's neck and spoke to him in the calm voice he used with frightened animals. Thunder was a good horse, steady and gentle despite his size. Jake had trained him to accept riders other than himself. "Good horse," Jake said, leading Thunder closer to Ayanna. "Safe." Ayanna watched the interaction between Jake and his horse. Horses were important to Apache culture, and she could see that Thunder trusted his rider completely. This seemed to ease some of her fear. Jake knelt again, this time offering Ayanna a piece of jerky from his saddlebags. She took it hesitantly and ate with the hunger of someone who hadn't had food in days. While she ate, Jake gathered information from the destroyed camp. The attack had been recent, probably yesterday evening. The raiders had taken most of the horses and anything valuable they could carry, but they had also done unnecessary destruction, burning things that served no purpose except cruelty. This wasn't just a raid for supplies. Someone had wanted to send a message. Jake found tracks leading north toward the town of Cedar Ridge. He knew most of the men in that area, and several of them had made no secret of their hatred for Apache people. The territorial government's policy of moving tribes to reservations had created tension, but some men took it further than others. When Jake returned to Ayanna, he found her trying to stand. She made it halfway up before her injured ankle gave out, and she fell back with a gasp of pain. Jake caught her before she hit the ground, his strong arms supporting her weight. For a moment, they looked at each other in silence. Jake saw intelligence in Ayanna's dark eyes, along with pain and lingering fear. She saw something in his blue eyes that made her decision for her. Whatever this white cowboy intended, it had to be better than staying in this place of death. "Help?" Jake asked simply. Ayanna nodded once, a small but significant gesture of trust. Jake helped her to Thunder's side. The horse stood perfectly still as Jake lifted Ayanna onto the saddle. She winced with pain but didn't cry out. Her hands found the saddle horn, but she still clutched her leather pouch. Jake mounted behind her, careful not to crowd her. He could feel how tense she was, ready to fight or flee despite her injuries. "Safe," he said again, hoping she understood more than just the word. As they rode away from the destroyed camp, Jake's mind was already working on the problems ahead. Taking in an Apache girl would make him enemies among his own people. Many whites in the territory saw all Native Americans as dangerous, regardless of circumstances. But Jake had seen enough violence to know that cruelty had no color. They rode north for several hours, avoiding the main trails. Jake knew a hidden canyon where they could rest safely while he figured out their next move. Ayanna said nothing during the ride, but Jake felt some of the tension leave her body as they put distance between themselves and the attack site. The canyon was exactly as Jake remembered it. High red walls provided shelter from both sun and wind, and a small spring offered fresh water. Jake had used this place as a camp before when tracking outlaws through the rough country. Jake helped Ayanna down from Thunder and led her to a shady spot near the spring. She moved carefully, favoring her injured ankle, but she was stronger than she looked. Jake gathered firewood while she washed her face and hands in the clear water. As evening approached, Jake built a small fire for cooking. He had enough supplies for several days, and he shared everything freely with Ayanna. She watched him prepare their simple meal with curious eyes, noting how he moved around the camp with practiced efficiency. After they ate, Jake tried to communicate their situation. Using gestures and the few Apache words he knew, he explained that they were safe for now, but that she needed medicine for her injuries. Ayanna listened carefully, occasionally nodding to show she understood. When Jake pointed toward the direction of Cedar Ridge and shook his head with a frown, Ayanna's eyes grew hard. She spoke quickly in Apache, and Jake didn't need a translation to understand her anger. She knew who had attacked her people. That night, Jake kept watch while Ayanna slept fitfully near the fire. He had made a decision that would change both their lives. Tomorrow he would take her to the doctor in Cedar Ridge, regardless of what people said. After that, he would help her find surviving members of her tribe. What Jake didn't know was that news of the Apache attack had already reached Cedar Ridge. The same men who had destroyed Ayanna's camp were now spreading stories about Apache raiders threatening white settlers. They were calling for more attacks, more violence. Jake Harrison was about to walk into a storm of hatred and fear, with only his courage and his conscience to guide him. The quiet cowboy who had always tried to do right was about to discover just how dangerous that could be in a land where hatred ran deep and justice was often decided by the fastest gun. As the stars appeared overhead, Ayanna stirred in her sleep and whispered something in Apache. Jake couldn't understand the words, but the tone spoke of loss and sadness beyond her years. He added more wood to the fire and settled in for a long night of watching and thinking. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, in this peaceful canyon, an unlikely bond was forming between a cowboy and an Apache girl. Neither could know that this bond would soon be tested by forces that wanted to destroy everything decent in the harsh frontier world. The morning light revealed the full extent of Ayanna's injuries. Her forehead cut had stopped bleeding but needed proper stitching, and her ankle was swollen to twice its normal size. Jake examined her ribs carefully, relieved to find they were only bruised, not broken. Still, she needed medical attention he couldn't provide. Jake helped Ayanna onto Thunder, and they began the dangerous journey toward Cedar Ridge. He chose back trails and avoided open country where they might be spotted. Something in his gut told him that bringing Ayanna to town was going to cause trouble, but leaving her injured in the wilderness would be worse. As they crested the final hill before Cedar Ridge, Jake pulled Thunder to a stop. Below them spread the small frontier town with its dusty main street and scattered buildings. Everything looked normal, but Jake noticed more horses than usual tied up outside the Silver Dollar Saloon. Men stood in groups on the wooden sidewalks, their conversations animated and their gestures sharp. "Stay close to me," Jake murmured to Ayanna, though he wasn't sure how much English she understood. They rode slowly down Main Street, drawing stares from everyone they passed. Mrs. Henderson dropped her laundry basket when she saw them. Old Pete Johnson spat tobacco juice and scowled. By the time they reached Doc Patterson's office, a small crowd had begun to follow them. Jake dismounted and helped Ayanna down, noting how the crowd's muttering grew louder. He recognized most of these people. Some had been his friends. Now they looked at him like he had betrayed them somehow. Doc Patterson emerged from his office before Jake could knock. The elderly doctor took one look at Ayanna's injuries and stepped aside to let them enter. "Bring her in quick, Jake," he said quietly. "This town's gone crazy since yesterday." Inside the office, Doc Patterson began examining Ayanna while Jake explained how he had found her. The doctor's face grew grim as he cleaned and stitched her forehead wound. "Jake, you need to understand what you're walking into," Doc Patterson said as he wrapped Ayanna's ankle. "Frank Morrison and his boys rode into town yesterday claiming Apache raiders killed 3 white families north of here. They're calling for armed patrols and talking about clearing out all the Apache camps in the territory." Jake's hands clenched into fists. "Frank Morrison's a liar and a killer. I saw what was left of that Apache camp. White men did that, not the other way around." "You and I know that," Doc Patterson replied. "But most folks in this town only hear what they want to hear. Morrison's got them scared and angry." As if summoned by their conversation, heavy footsteps sounded on the porch outside. The door burst open without a knock, and Frank Morrison strode into the office with 3 of his men behind him. Morrison was a big man with cold gray eyes and a reputation for violence. He owned a large ranch north of town and employed gunmen as much as cowboys. "Well, well," Morrison sneered, looking at Ayanna with disgust. Jake Harrison protecting the enemy. Didn't think you'd turn traitor, Harrison. Jake stepped between Morrison and Ayanna. This girl's hurt and needs medical attention. That's all that matters here. Morrison laughed harshly. That girl is probably one of the raiders who killed the Johnson family yesterday. Apache don't show mercy to white children, so why should we show mercy to them? Because we're supposed to be better than that, Jake replied evenly. And because this girl didn't kill anybody, she's a victim, not a raider. You calling me a liar? Morrison's hand drifted toward his gun. Jake's own hand moved to his pistol, but he didn't draw. I'm saying you weren't there when I found her. I was. She was hiding under some wreckage, scared and hurt. The only tracks around that camp belonged to white men wearing boots, not Apache wearing moccasins. Morrison's face reddened with anger. You've been spending so much time in the desert, you've gone Apache yourself. Maybe we need to treat you like one. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Doc Patterson stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation. Gentlemen, this is a place of healing. Take your arguments outside. No argument here, Doc, Morrison said, his eyes never leaving Jake. Just making sure everyone knows where they stand. Harrison, you got 24 hours to get that Apache girl out of my town. After that, we handle this our way. Morrison and his men left, but their threat hung in the air like smoke. Doc Patterson finished bandaging Ayanna's injuries while Jake considered their options. The girl had understood enough of the confrontation to look frightened again. You can't stay at the hotel, Doc Patterson said quietly. Morrison's got too many friends in this town. But old Maria Gonzalez might help. She lives in that little house behind the church. She's got no love for Morrison or his kind. Jake nodded gratefully. Maria Gonzalez was a Mexican widow who ran a small boarding house for travelers. She had always been kind to Jake, and more importantly, she understood what it meant to face prejudice. As they prepared to leave, Doc Patterson handed Jake a bottle of medicine and clean bandages. Change these twice a day, he instructed. And Jake, be careful. Morrison's not just talk. He's killed before. Jake helped Ayanna back onto Thunder, acutely aware of the hostile stares following them. Word had spread quickly, and more people lined the street to watch them pass. Some shouted insults. A few threw rocks, though none came close to hitting their targets. At Maria's house, the elderly woman took one look at Ayanna and ushered them inside without question. Pobrecita, she murmured, using the Spanish word for poor little one. Maria had raised 5 children of her own and recognized suffering when she saw it. Maria prepared a meal while Jake explained the situation. The older woman listened with growing anger as she learned about Morrison's lies and threats. That man is evil, Maria declared in her accented English. He thinks his money makes him king of this town, but not in my house. The girl stays as long as she needs. That evening, as Ayanna rested on a clean bed for the first time in days, Jake sat with Maria on her front porch. They could see groups of men gathering outside the saloon, their voices carrying in the still air. They're planning something, Maria observed. Morrison's been buying drinks all evening. When he buys drinks, men listen to his lies. Jake nodded grimly. I need to get her out of here tomorrow, but first, I want to find out where her people went. She deserves to be with her own family, not running from town to town. Where will you look? There's a trading post 2 days south of here. The owner, Samuel White Feather, is half Cherokee. He might know where the Apache bands are camped now. If anyone can help reunite her with survivors from her tribe, it's him. Maria studied Jake's face in the lamplight. You're a good man, Jake Harrison, but good men sometimes die young in places like this. Maybe, but doing nothing while an innocent girl suffers isn't living either. Inside the house, Ayanna had been listening to their conversation through the thin walls. She understood more English than either Jake or Maria realized. Her father had traded with white settlers and had taught her their language alongside Apache traditions. She knew Jake was risking his life for her, and the knowledge filled her with both gratitude and guilt. Late that night, Ayanna crept to the window and looked out at the town. Groups of men still moved through the streets, and she could hear their angry voices. She touched the leather pouch she always carried, feeling the weight of the sacred items inside. Her grandmother's medicine stones, blessed sage, and a small silver cross her father had traded for years ago. These were all she had left of her family. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Maria entered with a cup of tea and a gentle smile. "Cannot sleep?" Maria asked in simple English. Ayanna shook her head. "They want to hurt Jake because of me," she said quietly, her words careful but clear. Maria's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You speak English well." "My father, he taught me. He said understanding both worlds was important." Ayanna's voice grew sad. "He was right, but it didn't save him." Maria sat on the edge of the bed. "Jake chose to help you. That's the kind of man he is, but you're right to worry. Morrison and his men are dangerous." "I should leave alone. Tonight. Then Jake will be safe." "Child, you can barely walk on that ankle. And where would you go? The desert will kill you as surely as Morrison's men." Ayanna was quiet for a long moment. "My people have a saying, the wolf that runs alone becomes prey for the pack. But sometimes the pack is the danger." Wise words. But remember, you're not alone. Jake has chosen to be your pack, and so have I. In the morning, we make plans together. The next morning brought bad news. Sheriff Tom Bradley arrived at Maria's house early, his face grave and apologetic. "Jake, I'm sorry, but I've got to ask you and the girl to leave town today. Morrison's convinced half the town council that she's dangerous. They're talking about forming a vigilante committee." Jake had known Sheriff Bradley for 5 years and respected the man, but Bradley was practical above all else. He kept the peace by avoiding conflicts he couldn't win. "Tom, you know Morrison's lying. This girl couldn't hurt a fly right now." "I know that, and you know that. But Morrison's got people scared. Last night, Mrs. Patterson swore she saw Apache signal fires in the hills. Pure nonsense, but fear makes people see things that aren't there. So you're going to let Morrison run an innocent girl out of town?" Sheriff Bradley's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to prevent a lynch mob, Jake. Morrison's got 20 men ready to ride. I've got 2 deputies. You do the math." Jake understood the sheriff's position, but understanding didn't make it easier to accept. "Give me 2 hours to get her ready to travel. I'll do what I can to slow Morrison down, but don't push it. And Jake, watch your back trail. Some of Morrison's men are talking about following you out of town." As Sheriff Bradley left, Jake realized their situation had become even more dangerous. They weren't just leaving Cedar Ridge. They were fleeing for their lives. The journey to Samuel Whitefeather's trading post would take them through rough country where Morrison's men could stage an ambush without witnesses. Jake began checking his weapons and supplies, while Maria helped Ayanna prepare for the journey. The girl moved better than the day before, but she was still weak and in pain. A 2-day ride through desert country would test her endurance to its limits. As they prepared to leave, Jake noticed Ayanna watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. There was gratitude there, but also something else. Determination, maybe, or resolve. The frightened girl he had found in the wreckage was still there, but something stronger was emerging as well. Neither of them knew that Morrison had already sent 3 of his best trackers ahead to watch the trails leading out of town. The trap was being set, and Jake and Ayanna were about to ride straight into it. Jake and Ayanna left Cedar Ridge under the cover of early morning mist, but Jake knew they weren't leaving unseen. His years as a tracker had taught him to notice when he was being watched, and the feeling of eyes on him was strong as they rode south toward the desert. They had been traveling for 3 hours when Jake spotted the dust cloud following them. 3 riders, maybe 4, staying just far enough back to avoid being clearly seen. Jake cursed under his breath and urged Thunder to a faster pace. "We've got company," he told Ayanna, who had been riding mostly in silence since they left town. She turned to look behind them, her dark eyes scanning the horizon with the skill her people were famous for. "4 men," she said quietly. "They've been following since we crossed the creek." Jake was surprised by her observation skills, but pleased that she felt comfortable enough to share information. "Can you ride faster? That ankle holding up?" "I can ride," Ayanna replied firmly. "But running in open country is foolish. They have fresh horses. We need to be clever, not fast." Jake found himself smiling despite their danger. The girl was thinking like a warrior, not a victim. "What do you suggest?" Ayanna pointed toward a series of rocky hills to their left. "There. Narrow passages, many places to hide. Apache country favors the Apache. You know that area? My father brought me there once to show me the old stories painted on the rocks. I know a place." Jake trusted her judgment and turned Thunder toward the hills. Behind them, the dust cloud changed direction to follow. Morrison's men weren't giving up easily. The rocky terrain slowed their pace, but it would slow their pursuers even more. Ayanna guided them through passages that seemed too narrow for horses, but somehow Thunder managed to squeeze through. The girl's knowledge of the area was impressive, and Jake began to understand why her people had survived in this harsh land for so many generations. They reached a hidden canyon just as the afternoon sun was beginning to lower in the sky. Ayanna led them to a place where the canyon walls curved back on themselves, creating a natural shelter hidden from view. A small spring provided water, and there was enough grass for Thunder to graze. "They'll have to come through that narrow passage one at a time," Ayanna explained, pointing to the canyon entrance. "In my grandfather's time, 12 warriors held off 50 soldiers here." Jake studied the defensive position with professional interest. "Good choice. But we can't stay here forever." "No need. Tonight, when the moon is dark, there's another way out. A path my people used when hunting. It leads to the trading post you spoke of." As evening fell, they heard horses and voices echoing off the canyon walls. Morrison's men had found the entrance, but were smart enough not to enter the narrow passage in failing light. They would wait for morning and try to starve Jake and Ayanna out. Jake built a small fire using dry wood that would produce no smoke. As they shared a meal of jerky and hardtack, Ayanna opened her leather pouch for the first time since he had found her. Inside were the items Maria had guessed at: medicine stones, sage, and something Jake hadn't expected. "My father's badge," Ayanna said, showing him a tarnished, star-shaped piece of metal. "He was a scout for the army before the trouble started." Jake examined the badge carefully. It was genuine, issued by the territorial government to Apache scouts who worked with the military. "Your father was John Littlefeather?" Ayanna's eyes widened in surprise. "You knew him?" "I met him once, 3 years ago. He helped track down some cattle thieves who were using Apache territory to hide stolen herds. He was a good man." For the first time since Jake had found her, Ayanna smiled. "He always said there were good white men, just like there were good and bad Apache. He wanted peace between our peoples." "What happened to him?" Ayanna's smile faded. "Morrison's men came to our camp flying a white flag. They said they wanted to talk about moving to the reservation. My father trusted them because of the peace flag." Her voice grew hard. "There was no talk, only shooting." Jake felt anger burning in his chest. "How many survivors?" "Maybe 20. They scattered in different directions when the shooting started. My uncle might have led some to the old place near Red Rock Mesa." Jake knew the area she meant. It was rough country, but it had water and game. A good place for a small band to survive while they decided what to do next. "We'll find them," Jake promised. "Samuel Whitefeather will know how to get word to them safely." That night, Jake kept watch while Ayanna slept. Around midnight, he heard Morrison's men talking in low voices near the canyon entrance. They were planning to rush the passage at first light, hoping to catch their quarry still sleeping. Jake gently woke Ayanna when the moon was at its darkest point. She led him to what looked like a solid rock wall, but her hands found handholds that had been carved there generations ago. The path was steep and dangerous in the darkness, but it led up and over the canyon rim to a gentle slope that would take them miles away from Morrison's trap. They climbed in absolute silence, communicating only through touch and gesture. Thunder followed with the sure-footed confidence of a horse trained in mountain country. By dawn, they were 10 miles away, while Morrison's men were probably still waiting for them to emerge from a canyon they had already escaped. The trading post appeared before them like a mirage in the morning heat. Samuel Whitefeather's establishment was built around a natural spring, with corrals for horses and sturdy adobe buildings that could withstand both weather and trouble. The man himself emerged as they approached, a tall figure with graying hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Jake Harrison," Samuel called out in greeting. "Heard you were having some difficulties in Cedar Ridge." "News travels fast out here," Jake replied, dismounting and helping Ayanna down. "Bad news always does." Samuel's gaze took in Ayanna's injuries and the way she carried herself. "Apache? This is Ayanna, daughter of John Littlefeather." Samuel's expression changed immediately. "John's daughter? Child, I'm sorry for your loss. Your father was a man of honor." Ayanna inclined her head respectfully. "You knew my father well?" "We traded together for many years. He spoke of you often, said you had the wisdom of your grandmother and the courage of your grandfather." Samuel gestured toward his main building. "Come inside. You both look like you could use food and rest." Inside the trading post, Samuel listened carefully as Jake and Ayanna told their story. The older man's face grew grim as he learned of Morrison's lies and the attack on the Apache camp. "Morrison's been spreading his poison as far south as Tucson," Samuel reported. "Claims he's organizing settlers for their own protection, but smart folks know he's really organizing them for his profit. Apache land has good water and grass, worth a fortune to the right buyer." "Can you help Ayanna find her people?" Jake asked. "Already ahead of you? Got word 2 days ago that some of John's band made it to Red Rock Mesa. They're planning to move north to join relatives in New Mexico, but they wanted to search for survivors first." Samuel turned to Ayanna. "Your Uncle Swift Horse is leading them. Good man, like your father." Relief flooded Ayanna's face. "They're alive. Last I heard, but getting you to them won't be easy. Morrison's got men watching all the trails north of here. He knows if you reach your people alive, you'll tell them what really happened. Can't have witnesses to his lies." Jake had been studying a map on Samuel's wall. "What about the old mining road through Devil's Canyon? It's rough, but it connects to the Mesa Trail." Samuel nodded slowly. "Dangerous country, but you're right. Morrison's men won't expect anyone to try that route. There's an abandoned mine station halfway through where you can rest and resupply." As they planned their route, a rider approached the trading post at full gallop. Samuel grabbed a rifle and motioned for Jake and Ayanna to stay inside while he investigated. The rider was a young Mexican cowboy named Carlos, who worked for a ranch south of Cedar Ridge. His news wasn't good. "Senor Samuel," Carlos gasped, still out of breath from his hard ride. "Morrison and 20 men left Cedar Ridge this morning. They're riding this way, asking about Jake Harrison and an Apache girl." Samuel thanked Carlos and sent him on his way with supplies and silver for his warning. Then he turned to Jake with urgency. "You need to leave now. Morrison will be here by evening, and I can't hold off 20 armed men. But I can delay them. Maybe send them in the wrong direction. Jake began gathering supplies while Ayanna prepared Thunder for another long ride. Samuel provided them with a pack mule loaded with food, water, and ammunition. He also gave Ayanna something unexpected, a letter written in Apache script. "From your uncle," Samuel explained. "He left it here hoping you might find your way to me. It tells you how to find their current camp." Ayanna read the letter quickly, tears streaming down her face. Her people hadn't forgotten her. They were waiting and hoping for her return. Jake and Ayanna left the trading post as storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The weather might slow their pursuers, but it would make their journey through Devil's Canyon even more treacherous. Still, they had no choice. Morrison was too close now for any other option. As they rode toward the canyon entrance, Jake reflected on how much had changed since he found Ayanna in the ruins of her camp. The frightened, injured girl was gone, replaced by a young woman who moved with confidence and purpose. She had found her strength again, and Jake was proud to have helped her discover it. "Jake," Ayanna said as they reached the canyon rim, "when this is over, when I'm safe with my people, what will you do?" Jake considered the question. "Don't know. Can't go back to Cedar Ridge, that's certain." Morrison made sure of that. "My uncle will welcome you. Apache people don't forget those who show courage and kindness." "I appreciate that, but your people need to focus on staying safe, not taking care of stray cowboys." Ayanna smiled, and Jake saw both her father's wisdom and her grandmother's strength in that expression. "You're not a stray cowboy, Jake Harrison. You're family now. That's how Apache law works." As they descended into Devil's Canyon, with Morrison's men hours behind them and uncertain dangers ahead, Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt like he belonged somewhere, like he was part of something bigger than just his own survival. The journey to Red Rock Mesa would test them both, but Jake knew they would make it. They had come too far and overcome too much to fail now. Behind them lay hatred and violence. Ahead lay family, hope, and a new beginning. Thunder's hooves echoed off the canyon walls as they rode deeper into Apache country, where ancient laws still mattered, and a man's worth was measured by his actions, not the color of his skin. For Jake Harrison, the cowboy who had always tried to do right, it felt like coming home.